This is PT Pro Talk, the podcast for physical therapists who want to improve their clinical skills and be more successful. I am Mariana Parks, physical therapist and your host, and today I'm excited to bring you my conversation with Professor Lorimer Moseley to discuss pain education. During our discussion, Professor Moseley will cover the main concepts from his book Explain Pain, how understanding why we hurt can contribute to healing, what the protectometer is, and how this pain treatment tool helps individuals understand their personal pain formula, educational strategies and principles that clinicians can implement in their practices, expectations for the future of pain neuroscience, and much more. Our guest is a professor of clinical neurosciences and physiotherapy with over 30 years of clinical experience in chronic pain management. He is a leading researcher who has authored hundreds of articles, multiple books and chapters, and is globally recognized for his contributions to the medical research and pain treatment. If you find this conversation informative, I encourage you to subscribe to our channel, hit a notification bell for updates, give us a thumbs up, and share this episode with colleagues in the clinical field who could benefit from our insights. Thank you for tuning in, and let's dive into the discussion. PT Pro Talk is only possible with the support of the forward-looking and innovative companies like Systems for PT, the Do Anything Anytime EMR. Systems for PT develops systems for clinicians so you can focus on your patients. Go to systemsforpt.com to schedule a demo today. Sarah Health. Have you heard of remote therapeutic monitoring? Does it sound complicated and hard to implement at your practice? It doesn't have to be. Sarah Health is revolutionizing RTM, making it straightforward for your practice. From easy onboarding to hassle-free billing, they cover it all. Hi Lorimer, welcome to PT Pro Talk. How are you today?
G'day, I'm very well. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for taking the time out of your busy schedule to be here with us today. I appreciate it. So let's just start talking a little bit about yourself and your background for the ones that don't know you.
How far back would you like me to go? Like I could tell you that, I grew up in Hawker and in the ACT, but I guess the relevant background, and I might just apologize for my voice at the start. I've been a bit sick, but I'm now completely not sick, but I have an immune system that gets sensitized when it's a bit sick. So it will take me another week or two to sound less nasally and less snotty. So I apologize, but I will do my best to speak clearly. So the relevant background, I guess really the relevant background, the answer that I give to a question like that now is different from what I would have given 20 years ago. So let's say it was 20 years ago, I'd say, well, I'm a physiotherapist and in treating people with chronic pain, I was simultaneously frustrated to bits with my inability to help people and excited about the possibility that was presented by, at that stage, neuroscience in general, neurophysiology. And that would have been my simple answer. And I would have said, so I did a PhD and I became a neuroscientist, studied how the brain does things, got involved in theoretical neuroscience and basic neurophysiology and neural network theory, and have become very excited about the power of understanding to change people's lives. That would be the abbreviated version. But now I won't give you the long version, but my relevant background now, I would say, started when I was a 14-year-old, first exposed to a situation of great threat to me. And now I understand that and the impact of that on my life for decades. And, I think all of these things have conspired in a really positive way to guide what I do now. But let's stay with the brief version for now, at least.
That's awesome. And so we know, everybody, I guess, knows or heard about the book Explain Pain. So I wanted to just get started talking a little bit about the book. And if you could summarize the main concept so people have a understanding of what the book is about.
Yeah, explain pain. Well, whenever I speak about explain pain, I need to speak about David Butler, who's co-author on that book, and the coming together of David and I is really important for the question you've just asked me, because I mentioned about being a physiotherapist frustrated and excited about possibility. And my clinical journey, my personal journey from a really bad football injury as a 19-year-old, 18-year-old, and then having chronic pain and not understanding it very well and not understanding why I was being treated the way I was, and my own sort of lived experience journey then sort of melded into my clinical journey, which I found myself just admitting to patients that I don't think I can help you, because what I think is going on for you is this, and those things, which speaks to your main concepts question, were things like pain is a really complex feeling that is produced. We feel it when when our body is under threat, and there are a lot of things that influence that. And one of the great discoveries of the 1980s was that, who'd have thought, neuroplasticity means that the nervous system changes when it keeps doing something. And that was captured as central sensitization at the time. And it was all attributed to the spinal cord. But I found that very exciting, and also a good reason to say to people, so my clinical skills as they are at the moment, I can't offer you much. And people would start coming back from those sessions saying, oh, yeah, no, it's definitely a bit better. Can we keep going on what we were doing? And I found that initially quite confusing, because all I've done is tried to give them the understanding that I have about how their system works. And then that, over a period of months and then years, made me think maybe this sort of education that I'm doing is more powerful than I would have expected. And I did a couple of clinical trials, not very well. I hadn't, I'd had very limited research training, but they've stood the test of time, and the effect sizes in those clinical trials 25 years ago are the same as the effect sizes that are being produced now in much more rigorous trials by different groups around the world. There's 83 different randomized controlled trials now centered around this intervention. And I went to a conference, and I was talking about this, and there was another speaker at the conference who was a clinical person involved in clinical education for a long time. I don't know if you're hearing those beeps. I don't know how to. I'll just turn off my my email for everyone, just in case that is annoying for anyone. So there was this fellow speaking at the conference, very flamboyant, eccentric guy with deep knowledge, and that was David. And we connected, and we realised over many coffees and then pizzas and wines that he and I had come to a pretty similar position on this through very independent pathways, and the clinical trials had returned certain results, and that made me comfortable in putting it out there. I wasn't comfortable to put it out there before that. I don't think my own personal experience is enough to convince anyone to do, try and replicate what I did. And that's common in health, isn't it? That people have a recovery journey and attribute it to something, and then claim, that all anyone ever needs is the same as what I did. And I didn't believe that. But the clinical trials were compelling, and David and I sat down and wrote the book, which has become pretty iconic. Like, it's amazing. It sells as many copies now as it did in the first couple of years. And I think that reflects that the key concepts around pain is multifactorial, the nervous system changes, but we are inherently plastic, so we can be strategic about changing it back. Understanding that most of us, or all of us with chronic pain, are probably safer than it feels like we are, so we can have confidence getting moving slowly again. And all those sort of messages are still very current, and they're still backed up by evidence. So they're the key concepts. And you started this conversation before we started recording by saying some people talk and talk in response to the questions, and I've just given you a very long question to a very long answer to a very short question. I apologize.
No, it's good. I like to hear all the story behind how everything started. So like on the book, you are saying like that this understanding of why people hurt, right? Let me see if I'm right. That understanding already helps on their healing. Just the fact that they understand why they are hurting. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think that's you can lock that in now on the basis of data. We have a sign in our lab that says always dance to the data. And what that means is if the data tell you you've got to change your understanding, you have to change your understanding, rather than create data to support your idea. So science works in the opposite direction. You design experiments to change your ideas, and when the data tell you to, you do. But I think the data are very strong to say understanding improves pain. But that's a different statement to education improves pain. And that's a critical distinction.
And so what is the difference?
We didn't plant that, if anyone's wondering if that was planted, but I did let it hang out there, didn't I? So one thing that we've learned over the last 8 years through a few different lines of research is that that changing your understanding of the problem when you have chronic pain, aligning your understanding or your understanding matching more closely contemporary scientific thought around how pain works and what we can do about it, improves outcomes. I think that's very compelling evidence to support that statement. But pain education, and I guess in North America, it's known as pain neuroscience education, and there's a push internationally to respect that for what it is, acknowledge that it was a great development, but it's only part of the way to really effective interventions. So the international movement is, okay, let's park that, and what we're now doing, we need a different name for because it's different from pain neuroscience education or what we tested 25 years ago. So those 83 clinical trials have pretty much tested the explained pain model that we developed 25 years ago. We don't do that anymore. That's not how we do it, and it's not what we do. But what I think has happened, and I wonder if it's particularly happened in North America, that's the vibe I'm getting internationally, in that education has become the thing, not learning. But the thing is learning. The thing is understanding. The data, I think, are very clear that when people learn and their understanding aligns more with contemporary scientific thought, they do better. But the evidence also tells us that we're not very good at instilling that deep learning. We're not very good educators, as a rule. Like even the best health professional pain educators are getting hit rates of maybe 50%. And by that I mean 50% of their patients, despite their best efforts, are not changing their understanding of the problem. And so that's the difference, right? The key here is not education. The key is learning. So we've got to get better at instilling learning. And as health professionals, we think good education is a catchy YouTube clip, or a really nice infographic. And as health professionals, we have been just so, in my view, at least naive, possibly arrogant in not looking towards the experts around learning to improve our education efforts. Until 7 or 8 years ago, which is where we really pivoted in that direction, and it's been fantastic.
And when you say education versus learning, you are educating, but you're not necessarily like learning. The person is not learning what you're saying. It's not like experiencing in a deeper, meaningful way. It's that you're saying, like, versus like a lecture. You're lecturing someone.
Yeah. So the explained pain model that we kicked off 25 years ago and has been tested in all of those clinical trials is primarily passive learning. So it's primarily didactic, audiovisual presentations, maybe reading, which is a bit more than passive. It involves active, but a lot of people read stuff without taking it in, and the education experts, the learning and conceptual change experts, would rate that strategy of education as the least effective out of 4 levels. And we've been very influenced by Mickey Chi and this model called the ICAP model. And the ICAP model should really go the other way around, because the I is the best one, but the P, the end, passive, that's the easy one for us as health professionals to do. We tell people stuff. We might draw them a picture. We might show them explain pain. Might even donate them a copy if we're feeling very generous. But that's the least effective. The next level up is called active learning, and in active learning, we're really getting people to do things that they can't do without concentrating on it. And we have a range of strategies now that fit in that level. So we go from passive to active, and there's a range of strategies that we put into our educational offerings now. And then the next level up is constructive. So we're helping people to construct new models of how things work, and we have strategies for that. And the last one is, it's interactive, but I like to think of it as inventive. So we target certain concepts and activities where people can invent new knowledge based on what they've already constructed. And that's the hardest one to do. So, it's easiest to do passive, but it's the least effective. And our modern pain education offerings are very strategic about going through those levels, providing experiences, being really clear on what it is we want someone to learn, like what is the exact objective we're trying to get across, and evaluating that, and then giving people skills partnered to the objective to operationalize that within their life so that they get confirmation, and from a neuroplasticity perspective, their brain starts to change, or their learning systems start to change.
Mm-hmm. And was that the update that you had on the book that you published 10 years after?
No. So the 2013 second edition of Explain Pain had some different content that reflected the 10 years of development in pain science that David and I thought was most relevant for recovery and having a good life. But these changes in how we do it, and actually the content now, so I would still say Explain Pain captures all the content, most of the content. And I still think it's the best resource for a clinic to have. For a clinic or a practice or a department to have, it's a bit hard for most patients on their own. But as a resource that we can centre educational nuggets around, I still think it's great. And we use active and constructive learning techniques that are centred around Explain Pain. But the updates in how we do it and the specifics of the most important content that sort of saves us doing it, trying to get everything across to everyone. We've spent a lot of time and a lot of research studies identifying what are the main concepts that seem to be universally applicable and helpful, and then what are the strategies. So we've just gone off to the printer a book called The Resolve Back Pain Handbook, and that integrates, that's the most contemporary version of the strategies and the ways of getting across things, and it's centered around the treatment that we tested in a clinical trial published in JAMA last year. So it was education grounded, and then had sort of brain retraining and body retraining components to it as well. There's a book that we've published called the Knee Osteoarthritis Handbook that also has a lot of these contemporary strategies in it, but is targeted on people with osteoarthritic knee pain. So those handbooks, they're meant for patients, and they, if you're used to explain pain, you have a look at that. You'll even see the significant changes between that and, for example, the Protectometer handbook that was published in, I think, around about 2017 or something like that. So, yeah, it's different. Yeah.
And that's why I was going to ask about the protectomer. Like, what is that tool? How does it work? I saw there was like the danger in me, safety in me, like what all of that means.
Yeah, so that's the protectometer is just a hit, right? It's an absolute hit. So that's an example of operationalizing what we're learning. And the original protectometer had 7 categories of things that people could slowly work their way through to look for any cue or input or factor that was telling their system there was danger in me. And so we'd call them DIMS, D-I-M, DIMS. And that might be anything from I'm not sleeping well, I'm eating a lot of high-calorie food, I have a flare of my rheumatoid arthritis, all of those things across many categories. And if it was logically consistent with danger, we'd call it a DIM. However, if it was logically consistent with safety, we'd call it a SIM, safety in me. And then this has become known amongst clinical groups, amongst patients, as DIM-SIM therapy in Australia, and the UK and Europe, and I know across some of North America. But in Australia, dim-sims are what you guys call, I think, a dim sum, or it's a fried Asian food. Maybe call it dim sum or something like that. Anyway, we call them dim sims. So it's very catchy here. And it's an easy way of thinking about what could be telling my system you need to protect yourself. What can I find that can tell my system you're safe? And as clinicians, we can think all the time about dim sims, right down to what's my facial expression saying to this person in front of me? Is it saying they are in danger, or disbelief, or shock, or even our clumsy attempts to validate someone's experience where we actually reinforce some half-true or untrue notion of catastrophic structural damage. That's physios do that a lot. Maybe not as much as surgeons who say, that was pretty horrible in there. And that's validating their experience. Whereas what we should be doing is saying, you're in a lot of pain. I can see that. And my angle on that would be to then follow that up, pair that with, that's your system working very hard to protect you right now. Let's think about all the reasons it might be doing that. So we just sort of expand our understanding. And the protectometer has been updated now on the basis of a lot of consumer and clinician feedback. And it's now, it looks different. So we've made one actually, like it's about the size of a really big TV, those old TV sets, or a big suitcase. And it's got 5 sliders on the front. And those sliders have categories, and the categories are beliefs, behaviors, current environment, past experience, and general health. And we walk through those sliders with people. And the protectometer now gives us a way of visualizing what happens. If you have some general health dims, you're a little bit sick like I've been in the last week, that slider goes up, and then the protection level across the top shifts in line with that. And it's a really effective way of getting people to understand that many factors influence pain. They influence your protective setting. And your protection setting is what determines your sensitivity to mechanical loading or other cues and threats or dims. And so far it's been a really successful way of operationalizing the learnings around how pain works and how chronic pain changes, like the system changes in chronic pain, but also how you can gradually work the system back towards normal.
Mm-hmm. So it's like something that you use to help the patients be aware of all these different factors that are influencing their pain. So they have a better understanding on how these things work.
Yeah, and I guess what's really, well, there's lots of really important things from my perspective about the protectometer, but I took it upon myself some time ago to draw how pain works. And in order to do that, I looked for, in the literature, for empirical evidence of something changing pain. So, for example, we did experiments on humans that showed that the color of a cold thermo changes how much the pain is as a result. And then across all these different areas, and that took a long time. And I drew that, and then what that demonstrates is that if we were to go through the common way of trying to help people manage pain is to say, okay, identify everything that's affecting your pain. And that can be very difficult to do because it might be tiny effects. What the protectometer does is it says, these are all the things that we know can affect pain. And the principle is very, very simple. And that is, if whatever it is implying danger or a need to protect, then it has the capacity to influence pain up, shift the protectometer, and make your system more sensitive. And the opposite is also true. So the protectometer approach doesn't say to people, let's spend time identifying all the things that you know affect your pain. It takes a different approach where it says, let's identify all the things in your life that logically would be taking protection settings up or down, and then think about how you can practice the SIMs, how you can remove as many DIMs as you can, but those DIMs that you can't remove, you can offset with SIMs. So it becomes a very simple formula that people just get better at doing. We say, ditch the DIMs that you can, and the DIMs that you can't. For example, some people will identify that their life partner is a DIM for their back pain. But they can't ditch their partner for whatever reason. It might be a very good reason. But there's now a target to be able to bring that partner on a journey of understanding, to understand why their behavior around their back pain might actually be making it worse. And this is real, demonstrated, fundamental biology. It's not just a sort of a theoretical, crystal-based model. Yeah. So the protectometer is all about having some way to move forward once you understand that your pain system is hypersensitive and many factors will be affecting your pain. But that means that there are many factors that can help you reduce your pain and slowly retrain the system over time.
Mm-hmm. And like, what is the impact of that on their pain? Like, let's say, I don't know if you associate that with like treatment or if you're just using that. Can you tell a big difference just by them understanding and playing with these factors without having any intervention, like we say our normal traditional PT tools?
Yeah, I don't see those things as mutually exclusive. And actually, the PT, for example, has a wide range of skills and understandings that complement an education protectometer approach really well, and actually can provide fast-tracked vehicles. Now, it's very easy for a PT with manual therapy skills to modify someone's pain in a matter of a minute during, let's say, a movement, provocative movement, and then we can do something to that person, and then the pain is different. And there, for me, is the opportunity, and there's a whole lot of neurophysiology and neuroscience around this, but there's the opportunity to illustrate that the system can be downregulated. I've just delivered this whole bunch of SIMs into your system. I haven't changed the joint at all. with what I do. And that's really clear. And I think that the sooner PTs let go of the notion that a joint mobilization is doing something to connective tissue around the joint, that's old news, right? What's not old news and what is terribly exciting is that a manual therapy technique on a joint does a whole lot of neural stuff and a whole lot of psychological stuff and a whole lot of hormonal and immune stuff. And by getting you can sometimes get a massive improvement in range, for example. And there is the moment to be able to say, okay, so how can we collaborate here to identify ways that you can produce those effects in your system without relying on me to do it? So you've seen how amazing it is when, I have a lot of experience at doing this, but there will be other ways of tapping into these sims. Let's think about how we can do that. And ultimately, you want to be in a situation where you don't need me to do this. You'll be slowly retraining your system, and you can take to the bank absolutely that your system will adapt if you give it the right amount of demand and training. It will happen. Like there's no doubt about that, but it won't be quick. So you have to sort of learn how to do this over time. So in answer to your question, what evidence do we have of just parceling out that little bit? Well, the clinical trials do that. Clinical trials, as a rule, have to standardize treatment and isolate treatment in order to understand its effects. And there are around about 35 or 36 clinical trials that have just looked at the education component, no other component, no exercise or cognitive behavioral strategies or anything. And those trials show a small benefit, long-term benefit on pain and disability. And there was a paper published that's called a network meta-analysis. So it's pretty sophisticated evidence meta-analysis. It wasn't done by our group. It was done by Manuela Ferreira, a Brazilian now living in Australia. Her group did this network meta-analysis that concluded that pain education programs provide the most sustainable benefits of all the psychological and active treatments. They provide the most sustainable benefits at 12-month follow-up and beyond. And so therefore, I think the clinical trial literature is, in my view, very compelling that changing understanding is a key part of the pathway. And our audit data, so 1,500 patients who have participated in pain education, show very clearly that when that pain education is effective, recovery is back on the table. So a year later, the median outcome is recovery, pain-free life, if the education was effective. But it's only effective half the time. So we spend a lot, as I said, we're spending a lot of time and energy making pain education better, and it's better for sure. But it will take years for that data to emerge. So our clinical trials that we're starting now are doing what I would call better pain education. And the results of those clinical trials will be out in 5 years. But, to me, it's a no-brainer that the data suggests that pain education is the best treatment we have, or at least one of the best treatments we have for chronic back pain, at least, and I would say that applies more broadly. But it's not great. But if we make pain education better, I think the evidence is compelling that will create better outcomes. So we should be doing it now. I don't think we should wait for someone to spend $2 million on a comparison between good education and better education. We should just do better education.
That's very interesting. And I wanted to go back to like the passive, active, constructive, and the interactive that you're saying. So like the protectometer, where would you fit in that structure of those things that you said before?
Yeah. The protectometer starts with active, and then we can move it into constructive and then inventive. And for example, active just means that someone is changing something on one of those sliders and evaluating the impact of that. And that's a learning moment. When we're aiming at learning the concepts around how pain works, these core content, then we don't use the protectometer for that. The protectometer is about operationalizing or acting on it. So in a way, it's entirely active. The protectometer is not passive learning in any way. It's active. It's constructive when people are making predictions about what should happen on the basis of their understanding. So they're constructing an understanding of their health and their context, and they're putting in, for example, my relationship with my peers at work is part of my pain story. It's part of my pain mechanisms, and they're constructing new angles on that, almost like if you imagine building a brick wall, or it feels better to imagine building like a Tetris tower where little things are fitting in to build the story. And those little things might be, I understand that the way that my interpretation of the scan that I got was a dim, and that's constructing a model for them. And then inventive or interactive. So for interactive, that's something that we do a lot in our professional development courses now, and people will understand that when they experience that. But the reason I like inventive and interactive is that we can then say to people with a protectometer, okay, invent a way that you can elevate your activity level this week by finding sims that will take the protectometer down. So they invent a new, I don't say pain management, a new pain recovery strategy. And we want to put people into what I would describe as a recovery mindset, where everything is about constructing a deeper understanding of recovery and strength and beyond resilience, anti-fragility, like change, a plasticity mindset, and then inventing new ways of pushing that along into the future.
Mm-hmm. Very interesting. And do you have any advice or anything that clinicians could start doing in their practice now, based on everything that you said, that would help them educating their patients better?
Yes. I mean, I'm always apprehensive about advice, right? Because I don't know who it is who's listening to this right now. For each individual, they will have a broad and deep set of understandings that I don't have. And for me to offer advice is not necessarily solicited and may not be appropriate. However, having said that, I think there are things that every clinician could do better around trying to instill an understanding. And the first and for me most obvious bit that I think is a responsibility of a healthcare professional, and that is to get informed, really get informed about where it's at now. And what I mean by that is, okay, so what has the research told us over the last 10, 15, 20 years about what content is most important and what strategies are most effective? And we could say, okay, there's little take-home messages. For example, the clinician could just start thinking in all of the clinical encounters with someone in pain or in fatigue or describing stiffness, think about those feelings as protective feelings, not detective feelings. And what I mean by that is the biomedical model encourages us to think about a symptom like pain as a sign of pathology, right? And there's a lot of merit in that. But when someone has chronic persisting symptoms, to me, it makes a lot more sense to think about that symptom as a protective feeling. And what that means is that we change not just our understanding of the problem, but it also changes our clinical reasoning our field of view across this human. We know that when people adopt a contemporary understanding of pain, they become more biopsychosocial in their assessment, and their treatments become more effective. So we know those things. Outcomes improve. But I guess to speak to that question, yeah, there's lots of things that people can start implementing. But actually, everyone should come to a 2-day course I'm doing in San Francisco or New York City, specifically on this. And I've run this course now twice in Europe, and the feedback has just been absolutely fabulous for me, because the unsolicited appraisal is around, I'm changing the way I do things in the clinic. I'm changing the way I talk to people. I'm changing what I concentrate on, and I'm getting better at getting the understanding. I have more time. So, I could keep saying, well, these things work. It helps to validate the experience, not a supposed structural pathology. That really helps. There's so many things. But the first thing I would say is get informed. Get up to date. It's your responsibility. And our data suggests that when you do, your life as a clinician becomes better. You become more fulfilled. Your outcomes become better. You have more empathy in your bucket. You feel less burden. The guilt of not fixing someone tends to be replaced with the excitement of helping people move into a recovery pathway and mindset. So there's a lot of positives that just stem from get informed. Don't think it's over. Don't think what we were doing 25 years ago is as good as we're going to get, because it's way better now.
Well, we are going to make sure to put those dates on the show notes so people can take a look.
Excellent.
And go join you to learn more strategies, because that's what I'm curious about, because I think most people have heard about pain education, but I guess a lot of people think about it more in a passive way. They're talking to the patient, just saying things, but we are not, I guess, effectively engaging the patient in the process and making, like you said, the active, the constructive. Like, I thought it was very interesting, and I was curious to learn strategies, because we know you are having a better understanding, I guess, overall, like how pain works and all those things, but it's still, I guess, the challenge is how you do in an effective way that the patient, like you said, is going to understand, how you're going to engage them on that process. I feel like that's the challenge.
It's absolutely the challenge. And, when we teach strategies, we've got about 8 or 9 categories of strategy that people can be, clinicians can be intentionally utilizing during all of their work. A lot of our movement training is education. A lot of what we do is education, even if it's not aiming at cognitive outcomes. We might be aiming at movement or skill or behavioral outcomes. Even little tiny things like asking someone to recall what it is we discussed 10 minutes ago. And just saying, so you might recall that 10 minutes ago we were talking about how the intervertebral disc works. Can you remind me what you got out of that? And all of a sudden, that's an active situation. They have to recall it. They have to put it together. They have to articulate it. And then we get to evaluate, did it land? So, but it's not just for the evaluation. It's about neuroscience. It's about neural networks and long-term potentiation, and what's the window in which recall will help learning. And there's so much data on that sort of stuff. Let's use it. It's my feeling.
And like, if people want to learn more about those strategies, what are resources that you would recommend them check?
As it relates to pain education, the only resource I know of is a paper that was co-authored by an international group called PETAL, which stands for Pain Education Team to Advance Learning, or actually it stands for Pain Education Team of Absolute Legends. So we published a paper in the Journal of Pain around contemporary delivery strategies and models of pain education. That's published. I can give you a link to that, Mariana, and you could make that available.
Yeah.
As far as resources that can be read or watched around pain education, I don't know. I don't know of any, and that's on my list of things to do. But hate to sound like I'm just plugging it too heavily, but if you have access to San Fran in the first weekend of October or New York in the second weekend, come, because that's the point of those 2-day courses.
So you're going to talk about the strategies?
So talk about, demonstrate the strategies throughout the 2 days and use the strategies to demonstrate the strategies, but also give people opportunities to reflect on how they can do better. And as I said, Europe was the first time I've done this 2-day course, and it's the best feedback I've got. And I'm really excited about pain education within the context of wider PT and other practice, integrating it with our skill sets. I really do think that, and I often want to apologise to the field, because I was very naive when I started doing this stuff. And I think most healthcare professionals, thought that we were pretty good at education because we knew our stuff. And I think it's very clear that the passive education that we were doing, what's now known as pain neuroscience education, is good. I think the data, it's good. So I feel pleased about that. But it could have been way better, and I feel a little bit like I need to apologise to the field for being naive to what was possible, and probably attributing inappropriately allocating what the dominant mechanisms of effect were. And the last 10 years for me have been a very steep learning curve, shrouded in humility and excitement at what is actually possible when we do this way better within the context of our own skills and values and vulnerabilities, I think, and constraints. And that's, every health professional is different in that mix of things. So we're part of the learning journey, so we bring ourselves into that. But we've got to let go of this idea that, we do education. I did pain education, it didn't work. Or I did pain science and people don't like it. And aside from that not making sense, I would say become a good educator. We all remember our best teachers at school, right? Even if we hated school, we always had a teacher who was fantastic. And I think we should aspire to be health professionals who teach very well.
Yeah. And what are your expectations for the future? So, what do you think we should change or to go in the right direction?
Well, my hopes for the future are that a contemporary understanding of pain is accessible to everyone, regardless of whether they've injured themselves or they're in chronic pain or not. I believe if we can change consumer expectations and community norms around pain, chronic pain, treatment, recovery, then we will truly reduce the massive burden of chronic pain. And without doing that, it's going to be hard. So if we only target the therapeutic encounters, the clinical encounters, it's going to be difficult. But my hope is that would happen. My expectation is that I think we're at the beginning of a flood of high quality clinical trials that consistently show a change in understanding of the problem is the key to improvement and often recovery from chronic pain. There are now 4 high-quality clinical trials that are based on that idea that are showing pretty similar effects. They're different designs, but reasonably similar pre-post effects, and all significant compared to their comparator treatment published in big journals, all around education. The network meta-analysis say education. The audit and real-world data say education. But let's do it well. The key seems to be changing your understanding of the problem. So what are we waiting for? Let's get better at that. And then my expectation is that we will have more people recovering, fewer people developing chronic pain, and recoveries being beyond this health episode, that people obtain the understanding and skills to manage health challenges moving forward.
Yes. I know you're pretty much run out of time. A quick question. Is there a way to prevent that? You said less people having chronic pain. Do you mean prevention or just preventing them from becoming acute to chronic? Is that...
Yeah, I think the big return will be on preventing acute to chronic. That's a whole other ball game, because we're then working in the space where the biomedical model has done pretty well for a lot of conditions. But that's where I think shifting consumer expectations and community norms is key. Because if we have someone who turns up 6 weeks after the onset of back pain and is now recognizing, okay, I need to think more broadly about this so that I can recover. Imagine if they're thinking that rather than, this must be really bad, no one's found the problem, I need to find the right diagnosis, the right clinician, I need to strengthen this, repair it, cut it out, numb it, replace it. And clinicians are faced with having to first bring people around to a contemporary understanding and then delivering care. But imagine if we didn't have to first do that.
That would be a dream.
It would.
It would. So Lorimer, if people want to find you or contact you, is that a way they can do so?
They can easily find me because I have an unusual name that sounds way better with a Brazilian accent than with a nasal post-cold Australian accent. I'm very easy to find. I'm quite hard to contact. I get literally hundreds, sometimes thousands of emails a day from all over the world, and I can't possibly respond to them all. And I have a filter system that they're very good at doing that. So that's a bit harder. But if people want to know about like accessing the sort of stuff that we're producing, there's always our papers. There's always the Pain Revolution website. So I started a charity 7 years ago called Pain Revolution, which is all about changing consumer expectations, community norms, and healthcare professional capacity. And there's a range of resources there for clinicians, for the general public. It's quite Australian-centric, but there are other versions. So go to painrevolution.org. In fact, if you're really enjoying this podcast, sponsor me to ride our Pain Revolution Rural Outreach Tour, which is how we raise money to provide scholarships for rural health professionals. So in 2 weeks, I have to ride 850 kilometres, and having been sick and away, that's a serious physical effort for me. But we deliver outreach events en route and we train people. So Pain Revolution, you can go there, you can donate $10 to my cause. Do that. And then if you want to learn about some of the clinical trials and things, there's the pedal.org, pedalcollaboration.org. You can always try emailing me, but I apologize in advance if I don't get back to you. I apologize.
That's awesome.
Sorry.
That's awesome. Lorimer, thank you so much for taking the time. I really appreciate and enjoy our conversation, and I'm sure everybody learned a lot with you. So thank you.
Oh, thank you. Thanks for having me. I feel like I was one of those people who talk too much, but I guess that's the point in a way. Anyway, Thanks
It
a
was
lot for having
great.
me, and congratulations on what you're doing. I think it's a really important part of the whole jigsaw of changing understanding and reinstating enthusiasm and oomph about this, because it deserves it.
Absolutely.